The mountain lodge was silent except for the wind clawing at the stone walls like a wounded animal desperate to get in. 2:34 in the morning. The fire crackled in the massive fireplace, throwing shadows that danced and twisted across the hardwood floor. Elena Reynolds knelt beside a bleeding man she had never seen before in her life, her delivery uniform soaked through with melted snow and his blood, her hands pressed against a bullet wound in his side that would not stop weeping red onto the white towel she had grabbed from the bathroom. She was 27 years old but looked like life had aged her by decades. Her dark hair hung in wet strands down her back. Her grey eyes were hollow from 3 nights without real sleep. The purple bruise on her left cheekbone had started to fade to sickly yellow, but it was still there. Still visible. Still a reminder of why she had driven through the blizzard in the first place. Behind her on the leather couch, 3 children sat absolutely motionless. Oliver, age 6. Maya, age 9. Sophia, age 12. They wore clothes that did not belong to them, borrowed from a shelter, smelling of smoke from the fire that had swallowed their apartment 3 days ago and left nothing but ash and Elena's broken heart. The man's eyes flickered open. Storm grey. Penetrating even through the fog of shock and blood loss. He focused on her face and something shifted in his expression, though she could not tell if it was recognition or the first moment before unconsciousness claimed him entirely. 2 men in suits stood frozen near the door. Vinny was older, maybe 50, with a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone like a map of violence. Theo was younger, late 30s, with the kind of expensive watch that cost more than Elena made in a year. Both men had guns drawn. Both men looked like they had never in their entire lives seen what they were seeing now. Their boss. Bleeding. Being saved by a nobody woman with calloused hands and a purple bruise on her face. Elena's phone buzzed on the floor. Once. Twice. 3 times in succession. Robert's name flashed across the dark screen in white letters like a curse. Robert Hargrove. The man she had gotten a restraining order against. The man whose violence had cost her everything. The man who had made it clear with text after threat that a piece of paper from a judge meant nothing to him because he knew cops. Good cops. Cops who looked the way when he came around. Pressure, Elena whispered, and her voice sounded like it came from very far away. You need pressure. The man did not respond. She was not sure he could hear her anymore. Vinny moved forward, but Elena's hand came up. Not aggressively. Just a small gesture, like she was asking permission to keep working. Like she was nobody making a polite request of powerful men. He is losing too much blood, she said. I need to get to the hospital. It is 20 minutes from here. Maybe less if the road's clear. You do not take him anywhere, Theo said. His voice was like venom. Nobody leaves this lodge. Nobody sees him. Nobody knows he is here. Elena looked at this man in his expensive suit and understood immediately that he was serious. That if she called for an ambulance, these men would make sure the ambulance never arrived. That if she tried to take him to the hospital, they would stop her. She looked back at the wound. It was not as bad as it had seemed in the first moments of panic. The bullet had gone through clean. No arterial spray. The bleeding was slowing as the shock deepened. He was pale but breathing. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Okay, she said. Okay. I can help him here. But I need water. Clean water. And more towels. And I need to get my children away from this. The phone buzzed again. Robert's name. Robert's name. Robert's name. Elena ignored it. She had found the wallet 6 hours earlier, at midnight, in the gutter outside the diner where she worked double shifts. It had been raining. The kind of cold Los Angeles rain that came maybe 3 times a year and made everyone forget how to drive. She had been taking out the trash, and it had been there between the storm drain and the curb, leather-worn and expensive, the kind of wallet that belonged to someone who had never had to count money. Inside was $3,000 in cash. $3,000. Elena's hands had literally trembled as she held it, imagining the possibilities. A hotel for 2 weeks. Real beds. Heat. Food that came from the grocery store instead of the trash behind the restaurant. Her children could have new clothes. Real clothes, not borrowed things that smelled like other people's lives. But there was also a photograph. A woman, maybe 60, with sad dark eyes and silver threaded through her black hair. Dressed simply. Not smiling. And on the back, in careful handwriting, 3 words. Come home soon. There was an address. The Mountain Lodge on Mulholland Drive. The kind of place Elena had only seen in movies, a house that existed in a world she would never be allowed to enter. She had made a decision that surprised even herself. She had kept the money but not the cash. She had not taken a single dollar. She had driven through the blizzard, for hours, because someone was missing their mother's photograph, and that mattered somehow. That mattered more than the heat that was running out in the motel room where she and her children had been sleeping since the fire. Now the man bleeding on the floor in front of her was breathing shallow, and the children were watching with eyes too old for their faces, and Elena was pressing towels against a bullet wound and understanding that she had made some kind of terrible mistake. But what she did not know, what no one in this room except Vinny and Theo understood, was that the wallet she had returned belonged to Matteo Castellano, one of the most dangerous men in Los Angeles. A man who had run his family's business for 15 years with an iron hand and a code. A man who had trusted his own brother with everything. A man who had been betrayed exactly 3 years ago. She did not know that this moment, here in the firelight with the wind screaming outside and her children watching in horror, had already changed the trajectory of everything. 1 hour earlier, before Elena made the decision to return the wallet, before she had driven through the blizzard, before she had even found the wallet in the gutter, Matteo Castellano had been warehoused in an industrial building on the edge of the city, shot by the men his own brother had sold him to, left for dead in the dark with a bullet in his side and another in his shoulder, and the understanding that his empire had betrayed him. His brother Marco had always been the weak one. Everyone knew it. Matteo had protected him anyway, made him lieutenant, made him rich, made him powerful. And Marco had taken everything he had been given and sold it to the Russians for money they both knew he did not need. The warehouse was cold. The pain had stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like the whole universe contracting into a single point. Matteo had crawled toward the door. He did not know how far. Could have been feet. Could have been miles. He had fallen against the window of a black SUV parked outside. Vinny and Theo had found him there, pale and shaking, the wallet clutched in his hand. The wallet with the photograph of his mother, dead now 3 years, and the address where she had always wanted him to come. She had never asked him for much. Just come home, she had written in a note he had found after her funeral. Come home and rest. Let the darkness go. He had never gone. The darkness had seemed more important than rest. Now, bleeding in front of a woman with kind eyes and borrowed clothes, Matteo Castellano was beginning to understand that his mother had known something he was only learning now. Elena moved his shirt away from the wound with hands that did not shake anymore. Shock had given way to something like purpose. She had cleaned up after drunk men in the diner enough times to not feel squeamish. She had held her daughter through a fever that climbed to 103 degrees. She had stood in front of a judge and testified against a man who had broken her ribs. Blood did not scare her. Suffering did not scare her. What scared her was the sound of the helicopter that had just started up outside. Red light sweeping across the lodge windows. The sound of engines, powerful and close, and the understanding that whatever was happening here, whatever this man had done to deserve being shot and hunted, it was going to pull her deeper in. The helicopter's light illuminated Oliver's face as he watched from the couch. Just for a moment. Long enough for Elena to see the terror there. She had survived Robert Hargrove. She had escaped an apartment fire that had killed 3 people in the unit above hers. She had kept her children alive on $200 and the grace of people she did not know. But looking at the wounded man, at the blood on her hands, at the helicopter circling the lodge, Elena understood that her survival was about to become infinitely more complicated. The phone buzzed again. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, her mother had told her once, years ago, when Elena was young and still believed in simple truths. Only love can do that. Elena did not know yet that love was about to become the most dangerous choice she could possibly make. The photograph trembled in Elena Reynolds' hands. 3 faces stared back at her from the only thing the fire had left behind: Oliver, age 6, serious and solemn, his father's dark eyes already learning not to trust. Maya, age 4, mid-laugh, her pink dress the color of cotton candy, a happiness that felt like a lifetime ago. Sophia, 2 years old, asleep against Elena's shoulder, her mouth open, defenseless. The photograph was still warm from Elena's coat pocket. Everything else was ash. The apartment building stood behind her like a corpse, blackened and smoking, the window's hollow eyes staring at nothing. The fire had taken 43 minutes to consume the entire structure. 43 minutes, the firefighter had told her, for everything a person owned to turn to smoke. She touched the charred door frame. The paint came away on her fingertips like the skin of something dead. Mr. Chen, her landlord, approached from across the parking lot. He was a small man, 71 years old, who had owned this building for 42 years and had never raised the rent on anyone in their first year. His face was the color of old newspaper. "Elena," he said. His voice shook. "I am so sorry." She did not turn from the doorframe. "Did anyone else die?" "3 people. Unit 401 above yours. A family, like you." The words landed like stones in her chest. She had heard their children playing on the roof sometimes, laughing, chasing each other in circles. She did not know their names. Mr. Chen pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand. "The insurance company called me this morning. Before they would cover anything, they needed to confirm the policy was active." Elena unfolded the paper with hands that had already learned not to shake. The letterhead was official. The words were official. The numbers were unmistakable. The policy had lapsed. 2 months ago. September. The premium was $187. She had chosen groceries instead. She had chosen milk for Sophia's bottles instead. She had chosen to keep her children alive on what she had and let the insurance lapse. The insurance company was calling it negligence. The insurance company was calling it her choice. "You have 7 days to vacate the property," Mr. Chen whispered. "I am so sorry, Elena. I am so sorry." She folded the paper again and again until it was small enough to disappear into her pocket. Beside it was her wallet. She opened it to count what remained. $200. Not 1 penny more. Not 1 penny less. The motel room smelled like cigarette smoke and mildew and broken promises. The walls were the color of a bruise, yellow turning purple. The carpet was the color of something that had been dirty for so long it forgot what clean looked like. 1 bed, a dresser with 3 legs, a window that did not close all the way, and 4 people who had nowhere else to go. Elena sat on the edge of the bed with Oliver on one side and Maya on the other. Sophia slept between them, her small hand wrapped around a corner of the blanket that had been her comfort object since she was born. The motel clerk had told her the room was $50 per night, and she could have it for exactly 4 nights. After that, she was on her own. After 4 nights, she had nowhere. After 4 nights, she had $199 remaining. Her phone buzzed. Robert Hargrove. Again. The 9th time that day. She watched his name illuminate the screen like a curse. She did not answer. She never answered anymore. He simply called, over and over, and she simply waited for the voicemails that came, heavy with the sound of breathing, sometimes with words, sometimes with just the terrible weight of his presence carried through the telephone line. The restraining order was crumpled in her purse. A piece of paper. The judge had issued it 6 months ago, his face stern and certain, his voice ringing out in the courtroom with the authority of law and right. Elena had held the paper like it was a shield. Like it meant something. Like paper could stop a man with fists. Robert had laughed when she showed it to him. You think this stops me? His voice had been so quiet, so gentle. That was how she knew he was serious. The quiet ones were always the worst. I know where you work, Elena. I know where the children go to school. I know where your mother lives. I know everything. Officer Martinez had come 3 weeks later, standing in her doorway with his hand on his belt, looking everywhere but at her face. At the split lip. At the bruises shaped like fingers on her upper arm. Without a witness, there's nothing we can do, he had said. His voice was bored. He was Robert's friend from the academy. They had done shots together on Saturday nights before Robert met Elena, before Robert decided she was his. The phone buzzed again. Elena turned it face down on the nightstand and opened her textbook instead. Medical billing codes. Insurance verification. Patient account management. If she could pass the certification exam in 4 weeks, she could work from home. She could make $17 an hour instead of $9. She could build something that looked like stability. The textbook's pages were worn from her fingers tracing the same lines, over and over, trying to memorize her way out of this room. At 11:30 that night, Elena clocked in at the diner. The Sunrise on Maple Street, a place that had been serving breakfast at 3 in the morning to the same 12 customers for 23 years. The cook's name was Dimitri. He was 67 and had immigrated from Georgia in 1994 with $300 and a dead wife's wedding ring. He had never asked Elena any questions about her situation. He had simply started saving her the day-old pie, wrapped in foil, and leaving it on the edge of the kitchen counter where she could take it without being seen. Double tonight, he asked, already knowing the answer. Double, Elena confirmed. She tied her apron, a threadbare blue thing with permanent stains from coffee and grease and time. I need the overtime. Dimitri nodded. He knew better than to ask why. He knew about the apartment fire because everyone in Los Angeles knew about the apartment fire on 7th Street that killed 3 people and left a woman with nothing but a photograph and a restraining order that meant nothing. The night moved in hours marked by the same faces, the same orders, the same transactions. Coffee, eggs, toast. Pancakes, bacon, orange juice. Tips that ranged from no tip at all to the businessman in the $3,000 suit who left $2 on a $40 check and walked out without making eye contact. Elena collected the $2. She added it to the $8 she had made from the other tables. $10 for 5 hours of work. Her feet ached. Her hand smelled like butter and desperation. At 2:27 in the morning, she clocked out and collected her paycheck. It was written for $112. Her double shift, 11 hours, for $112, which meant she now had $312 total if she didn't spend a single penny on anything else. She did not have a car anymore, the insurance on that had lapsed too. She had a delivery scooter with a cracked mirror and failing brakes that she had bought for $200 3 months ago with money she had saved from skipped lunches. The rain was coming down in sheets when she stepped outside. The kind of rain that fell sideways, that soaked through borrowed coats, that turned the city into something gray and cold and hostile. Her delivery scooter was parked under a broken streetlight. The mirror hung by a single wire. The brakes made a sound like metal screaming when she grabbed them. She sat on the seat and opened her medical billing textbook under the streetlight, the pages already spotted with rain. Patient account management. Insurance verification. The words blurred together. She needed $22,000 in 2 weeks. First month, last month, security deposit on an apartment far enough away that Robert could not find her, far enough away that she could breathe. Plus tuition for her night classes, which she had already suspended twice. She was 29 years old and felt like she was already ancient. The wind knocked over something metal 3 blocks away. The sound echoed through the empty streets. Elena looked at the photograph again. Oliver, Maya, Sophia. 3 faces depending on her to do something impossible. She stuffed the photograph back into her pocket and gathered her scooter to head toward her next delivery. She had 6 orders stacked in her bag for restaurants downtown, addresses scattered across 10 different neighborhoods, maybe $30 in tips if she was lucky and the customers were kind, which they usually were not. She was heading toward her first delivery when she saw it. A wallet, sitting in the gutter outside the closed diner, water running past it like a small dark river. She stopped. She should not stop. She should go to her deliveries. She should focus on the $30 in tips. But something made her lean down and pick it up, water streaming from it, the leather soaked and ruined. Inside was a photograph of a woman. Beautiful, dark-haired, with eyes that held something Elena recognized immediately. Pain. Loss. The kind of suffering that doesn't go away even when you smile for the camera. Beside the photograph was a name printed on a business card, and beneath it, an address. A mountain lodge. 4 hours north. Nothing else. Elena stood in the rain with a stranger's wallet in her hands, with a stranger's grief staring at her from a photograph, with her own impossible situation screaming at her to keep driving, to collect her $30, to go back to the motel and count her money and plan her survival. Instead, she opened her weather app and saw the storm warnings flashing red across every screen. The storm was coming north. The roads would be bad. She should not do this. She should absolutely not do this. She sat back on her scooter and entered the address into her GPS anyway. The highway disappeared behind Elena like a closing fist. Snow fell so thick now that the windshield wipers could not keep pace, just smearing white across white in endless circles. The borrowed Honda, Rita's 1998 model with the heater that only worked on the driver's side, groaned against the wind. Maya huddled under a blanket in the back seat. Sophia, 6 years old, had her forehead pressed to the cold window. Oliver, 5, gripped the photograph from the wallet like it was a lifeline. Elena's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. $200 sat in her jacket pocket. 13 days remained before Robert found her. Before he found them. "Mama, why are we driving in the storm?" Oliver's voice came small and uncertain. Elena did not take her eyes from the road. The GPS had died 7 miles back, screen going dark like a candle snuffed out. She was following memory now. Following instinct. Following a dead woman's photograph and the stranger who loved her enough to keep it close. Because, Elena said, someone lost something that mattered more than anything. And if I lost the only picture I had left of you 3, I would want someone to bring it back. Even in the storm. Especially in the storm. Oliver held the photograph higher. "She looks sad. Like you." Elena's throat tightened. She did not answer. Could not answer. The phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Once. Then again. Then 7 times in rapid succession. Elena forced herself to look. 17 missed calls. 1 voicemail notification blinking like a warning light. She knew the voice that would be waiting in that message. She knew the way it would sound, soft first, then dangerous. That was how Robert always worked. Soft, then dangerous. She almost turned the car around. Almost headed back toward the motel, back toward the shelter system, back toward accepting defeat as a reasonable option. Oliver sensed the hesitation. He reached forward between the front seats and touched the photograph, his small finger brushing the dead woman's face. "We do not give up on people," he said. Words Elena had told him 100 times. Words he had absorbed into his small heart like scripture. Elena nodded. Kept driving. The mountain emerged from the snow at 2:04 in the morning like a ghost made solid. The lodge materialized next, massive, dark, Victorian angles and stone chimneys and 1 light burning in an upper window like a single eye refusing to close. Elena pulled the Honda into the circular drive and put it in park. The engine ticked as it cooled. "Stay in the car," she said. "Lock the doors. If anyone comes, you call 911. Understand? Even if it is someone you know." "Mama," Maya's voice was frightened. "Lock the doors." Elena stepped into snow that came above her ankles. The wind tore at her coat, not hers, borrowed from Rita, thin and inadequate. The temperature had to be 20 degrees. Maybe colder. Her breath formed clouds that the wind scattered. The front steps were stone, worn smooth by decades. And on the topmost step, crumpled against the lodge door, was a man. He was sprawled like something broken, one arm flung across the weathered wood, the other at his side. His suit was black and expensive and soaked with blood that still ran, still steamed in the cold air. One bullet hole opened his side like a mouth. His skin had the waxy pallor of something dying. Elena did not think. She moved forward and knelt beside him, pressing her scarf against the wound, her movements automatic and sure because fear could wait. Physics could wait. Survival could wait. A human being was bleeding out on stone steps in the middle of nowhere, and that was the only problem that mattered. "I am sorry," she whispered, not knowing to whom. Two men burst from the trees at the edge of the property. Both wore expensive wool coats. Both held guns like they had been born holding them. The first one, older, scarred across his left temple, pointed his weapon at her. "Step away from him," he ordered. "Now." Elena looked up from the wound. Her hands were dark with blood. Her voice did not shake. "He is dying," she said. "If you shoot me, he dies in the next 4 minutes. If you help me get him inside, maybe he survives. Those are your choices." Silence fell. The wind carried the sound of the distant highway, the sound of the blizzard pressing against the world. The older man, Vinny, though Elena did not know this yet, lowered his gun slightly. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who returns lost things," Elena said. "Now are you going to help or are you going to stand there deciding?" The wounded man's eyes opened. Pale eyes, storm gray, the color of winter itself. They focused on her face with the kind of intensity that suggested he was seeing her from very far away, from the edge of darkness, from the place where consciousness fails. "The wallet," he whispered. His voice was like gravel dragged across stone. "You brought back the wallet." Then his eyes closed and his head dropped sideways and Elena was shouting directions, and somehow the three of them were lifting him, carrying him through the lodge doors into warmth that hit like a physical blow. The fire was a roaring animal in the stone fireplace. Elena spread the man on the leather couch and told Vinny to boil water. Told Theo, the younger one, with the neck tattoo of a scorpion, to find a first aid kit, find clean towels, find vodka, find gauze, find anything that could be used as a surgical implement. Her hands were steady now. Her mind had narrowed to a single point of focus. She had done this before. Not exactly this, not a bullet wound in the ribs, but she had sat in a hospital room for 14 hours while her daughter's pneumonia spiked to 104.2 degrees. Had learned to read monitors. Had learned the difference between panic that helps and panic that destroys. "The roads are completely buried," she said, not looking up from the wound. "The nearest hospital is 40 minutes in good weather. He has maybe 2 hours before he goes into shock from blood loss. I took field medicine courses last year. Unless you have a surgeon here, I am your best option." Theo stared at her like she had materialized from another dimension. "You are a delivery girl," he said. Elena met his eyes. "I am also a mother who watched her daughter almost die from pneumonia because I could not afford the ER, so I learned to handle emergencies myself. Now boil the water." She cleaned the wound with vodka from the lodge bar. The man's body went rigid, muscles clenching, and she heard him suck air through his teeth, but he did not scream. Did not beg. Just bore it with a kind of grimness that suggested pain was an old language he had learned to speak fluently. On the rug by the fire, Oliver and Maya and Sophia slept in their borrowed clothes, curled together like young animals. "Your children?" Vinny asked quietly. "Yes." "Their father?" Elena did not answer. She was focused on the bullet, visible now beneath the torn tissue, lodged shallow enough to remove without destroying vital structures. She positioned kitchen tweezers under the overhead light, took a breath, and began the precise work of extraction. "In 15 years, Vinny said, his voice carrying a note of something like wonder, I have never seen anyone talk to us the way you do. You talk to your boss, Elena said, concentrating, like he is the only thing in the world that matters. But he is just a man. And men bleed. Men die. Men need help, just like everyone else. The bullet came free. Elena held it up to the light, a small dark thing, nothing to look at, but it had rewritten this man's evening from routine to catastrophe. She placed it on a white napkin beside the couch like it was evidence. The man's eyes were open now, watching her work. She saw the moment he registered the scars on her hands. The wedding ring indentation still visible on her left ring finger, the pale line where gold had lived before survival demanded its sale. And the bruise on her cheekbone, yellow-green now, fading but unmistakable. "Who hit you?" His voice was barely a whisper. Elena did not look up from stitching the wound closed with the finest needle she could find in the lodge's collection of supplies. "Someone who does not matter anymore." "It matters." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "It matters." Elena finally met his eyes. "I have 3 children sleeping 6 feet away who have not had a real home in 4 days. I have $200 and 13 nights left before I have nowhere to take them. I have an ex-boyfriend who knows cops and thinks a restraining order is a joke. What matters is keeping them safe. Now hold still while I finish this." She completed the stitching with practiced efficiency, bandaged the wound with supplies the lodge provided, and then she washed her hands in the lodge's kitchen sink while watching her children sleep. When she returned to the couch, the man was watching her. "Why did you drive through a blizzard to return a wallet?" he asked. Elena held up the photograph, the dead woman, the dark-haired beauty with eyes that held everything. "Because if someone found the only picture I had left of my children, I would hope they would bring it back. Even in the storm. Especially in the storm." She did not know that the woman in the photograph was Sofia Castellano, dead 3 years, victim of a betrayal so deep that it had shattered everything Matteo thought he understood about family. She did not know that she was looking at the face of the wound that had never healed. Morning came grey and slow, the storm still pressing against the lodge windows. Elena made breakfast from what the lodge provided, pancakes for the children, strong coffee for the men. Oliver sat at the foot of the couch, looking at the man with the intensity of a judge evaluating a defendant. "Are you a prince?" Oliver asked. "You live in a castle." The man, Matteo, though Elena still did not know this, managed something like a smile. "Something like that," he said. "Mama says princes protect people. Do you protect people?" Elena could feel Matteo's attention shift to her, could feel the weight of something changing in the room's atmosphere, could feel Vinny and Theo exchanging a look, the kind of look that passed between men who had known each other for decades and rarely needed words. In Los Angeles, 3 hours south, Robert Hargrove stood in his apartment staring at his phone. Elena's location had pinged for hours north at 11:13 p.m. and then gone dark. He called Officer Martinez, his voice smooth and concerned. "I need you to run a plate for me. Honda Civic, 1998 model, registered to Rita Chen. My ex took my children without telling me. I am worried. I need to know where they are." Martinez hesitated. "Robert, you are not supposed to contact her. The restraining order." "I am not contacting her," Robert said, and his voice was ice and velvet combined. "I am making sure my kids are safe." In Brentwood, Evelyn Blackwell sat in her penthouse watching morning news with her assistant. Evelyn was 42 years old, old money, board member of 6 charities, her face familiar to anyone who attended the city's higher echelon galas. She recognized Elena's apartment building on the screen, fire damage still visible in the background. "Find out everything about the woman in the red coat," Evelyn said, watching the footage replay. A woman in a cheap borrowed coat, 3 children pressed against her legs. The one holding the children. "I want her name. I want her address. I want to know where she is staying." Her assistant looked confused. "Why?" "She appears to be homeless." Evelyn smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had learned that cruelty could be packaged as charity, that humiliation could be presented as concern. Because, Evelyn said, nothing raises donations faster than a desperate face on television. And that woman is about to become very famous. By afternoon, the snow had stopped. The roads were still dangerous, but passable. Matteo could stand now, could move without the world tilting sideways, could feel the edges of his life reassembling themselves into something resembling normal. "You should go," he said when Elena began gathering her children's things. "The roads are clearing. You should not stay here." Elena packed Oliver's jacket with careful precision. "I will find a motel. Somewhere safe for now. With $200. Matteo's voice held no judgment, only fact. "I have survived worse." Matteo reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. He set it on the table between them. Elena opened it. $10,000 in cash. She stepped backward, shaking her head. "I cannot take this." "You drove through a blizzard and performed field surgery with kitchen tweezers," Matteo said. "You can. Why would you help me? I am nobody." The words hung in the air like a prayer nobody had finished saying. Matteo's eyes held her for a long moment. "You are the first person in 3 years who did something because it was right, not because I could hurt them or pay them. That is not nobody." But what Elena did not know was that accepting his help meant stepping into a current that would sweep her toward dangers she could not yet imagine. It meant becoming visible to people who preferred their victims invisible. Vinny's phone buzzed. He stepped away from the window and answered, his expression hardening as he listened. "Boss," he said quietly. "We have a problem. Someone just asked questions about the woman who returned your wallet. Someone in the city. Someone with police connections." Matteo looked at Elena, who was buckling Oliver into his coat, unaware that the world was already beginning to move toward her. 1 week had passed since Elena Reynolds accepted the envelope of cash from Matteo Castellano. 7 days of careful transformation, a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in Burbank, enrollment papers for the children, a working delivery scooter that didn't rattle like it was held together with prayers. She had attended 2 night classes. She had not heard from Matteo. She did not know that 12 men had been assigned to watch her building, tracking her movements, ensuring that Robert Hargrove never found the apartment number. The November wind cut through the parking lot behind the diner like a blade wrapped in ice. Elena wheeled her scooter toward the back exit at 11:17 p.m., a shift envelope containing $134 in tips stuffed into her apron. 2 more weeks and she could pay next month's rent without touching what remained of Matteo's money. 2 more weeks and she might actually breathe again. Headlights swung across the concrete. A car she recognized. A body she remembered in the precise, bone-deep way that trauma remembers. Robert Hargrove stepped out of his unmarked police cruiser, tall, built like someone who used his body as a weapon, his uniform still perfectly creased at 11 p.m., his face carved into the expression of a man who had never been told no. He was 38 years old but had a violence about him that made him seem older, harder, like something drained of mercy early and never refilled. His eyes found her across the parking lot and locked on like a predator locating wounded prey. "Thought you could hide," he said, moving toward her. Not rushing. Moving with the confidence of someone who had never experienced consequences. His voice was flat, conversational, the kind of tone a man uses when he is absolutely certain of his power. "I told you, Elena. Restraining orders are paper." Elena stepped backward, her hand tightening on the scooter's handlebar. "You need to leave. Now. Where did you get money for an apartment?" Robert closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her upper arm like a vice. "Who are you with? Someone watching you?" "Another man." The pain that shot through her arm was old pain, a pain she recognized from the 3 years they had lived together, the years when she learned to flinch before he touched her. She tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "Let go of me." Robert shoved her backward. Her spine hit the metal frame of the scooter, the impact driving the breath from her lungs in a sharp, soundless gasp. His face descended toward hers, close enough that she could smell the beer on his breath, the cologne trying desperately to cover something rotten underneath. "You are mine, Elena. You and those kids. Nobody leaves me. Nobody." The word hung in the parking lot like a curse. Nobody. As if her choice, her escape, her determination to rebuild something small and safe for her children meant less than paper. As if she had not already sacrificed everything she had. 2 car doors opened simultaneously. The sound was precise, coordinated, the kind of sound that suggested preparation and practice. Vinny emerged first, tall, lean, his black suit tailored so perfectly it looked like armor. Then Theo, broader across the shoulders, moving with the deliberate calm of a man who had resolved 100 situations exactly like this one. Robert's hand fell away from Elena's arm. His fingers curled into fists. "Who the hell are you?" His voice had shifted. The predatory confidence had cracked just slightly, revealing the uncertainty beneath. Vinny stepped forward, his face expressionless as a stone. "Friends of the lady." Robert laughed, a harsh, desperate sound that echoed across the empty parking lot. "I am a cop's friend. You think you scare me? My lieutenant, Martinez, we go back 8 years. You walk any further and I make a phone call." Theo shook his head, very slowly. "You should not make that phone call, Mr. Hargrove." But Robert was already pulling out his phone, his thumbs moving across the screen with shaking fingers. The bravado had returned, that certainty of a man who believed the system had been built to protect him. "Martinez, I need backup," he said into the phone. "I have a situation. Homicide lot behind Sal's diner. 2 men, possibly armed. Now." He ended the call and looked at Vinny with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Vinny simply nodded, as if something had been confirmed, as if this moment was exactly what he had been waiting for. "Come on, Elena," Vinny said, gesturing toward the car. "We will take you home." Elena moved without thinking, muscle memory of survival pulling her forward. She was in the back seat of the black sedan before she fully understood what was happening. As they pulled out of the parking lot, she looked back and saw Robert standing alone under the sodium lights, his phone already to his ear again, calling someone, trying to reassemble his authority from the pieces of a situation spiraling beyond his control. What changed everything was what happened the next morning. Elena's phone rang at 8:06 a.m. She was helping Oliver with his cereal when the call came through, an unknown number, a voice bright and professional and dripping with a kind of charity that felt like honey poured over a blade. "Ms. Reynolds? This is Sarah Chen from the Evelyn Blackwell Foundation. We have been following your story through some mutual connections, and we would like to invite you and your children to be featured in our annual gala. It is a primetime broadcast, seen by nearly 5 million viewers. We would like to shine a light on individuals like you who are survivors, fighters, mothers who refuse to be broken." Elena's hand trembled around the phone. "I do not understand. How did you get my number?" "We did our research," Sarah said, her voice still bright. "We know about your situation. The fire, the loss of your apartment, your work as a delivery driver, your pursuit of education despite overwhelming obstacles. It is truly inspirational. We would like to offer you a $5,000 grant and give you a platform to share your story with the nation. All you would need to do is come to the broadcast studio tomorrow at 6 p.m. Elena thought of the rent. She thought of the books for her night class that she had not been able to afford. She thought of Oliver's shoes, which he had outgrown 2 weeks ago. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will come." What Elena did not understand was that acceptance was walking into a trap constructed by a woman named Evelyn Blackwell, a woman 63 years old, with silver hair styled into architectural perfection, with a face that had been surgically lifted so many times it had become a mask of itself. Evelyn had a net worth of $74 million, a foundation that was technically a charity but functioned as a personal tax shelter, and a deep, abiding contempt for people like Elena who had the audacity to be poor in a city that demanded wealth as proof of worth. Robert Hargrove had called Evelyn at 3:15 a.m. from a police holding cell, where he had spent the night after federal agents arrived at his apartment with a warrant. He did not know yet that his arrest was inevitable, that his connections with Officer Martinez had been documented, that his threats to Elena had been recorded and compiled into evidence so damaging that 40 years in federal prison was already looking optimistic for his sentencing. He only knew that someone powerful had decided to move against him, and that Elena Reynolds needed to be destroyed as a witness before that destruction was complete. Evelyn Blackwell understood leverage. She understood that a woman's desperation was the easiest currency to trade. She understood that primetime television could transform a private humiliation into public spectacle. The television studio green room smelled like hairspray and electrical equipment. The lights were too bright, set at a temperature that made Elena's borrowed dress, navy blue, borrowed from her night class instructor, feel like it was suffocating her. Oliver sat beside her in clothes that fit him, purchased from a discount store for $17, his small face solemn as he watched the monitor showing Evelyn Blackwell, perfect and polished and radiant with the kind of beauty that only unlimited money and unlimited cruelty could purchase. Tonight, Evelyn's voice floated from the speakers, "We shine a light on those who fall through society's cracks. Individuals who struggle in the shadows, unseen and unheard. Elena Reynolds is one such person. A delivery driver. A homeless mother. A survivor of domestic violence. Elena and her 3 children will be joining us to share their remarkable journey." Elena's hand shook. Her daughter, Sophia, squeezed her palm. Oliver looked up at her with eyes that had learned to read adult fear before they had learned to read words. The producer, a thin man with a clipboard and an expression of profound indifference, gestured toward the curtain. 30 seconds, Ms. Reynolds. Elena stood. Her legs felt disconnected from her body, as if they belonged to someone else and were merely performing the function of movement. She took Oliver's hand. She smoothed her dress. She walked toward the stage lights. Evelyn Blackwell's smile widened as Elena emerged, the kind of smile a predator makes when wounded prey finally enters its territory. The audience applauded, a sound like distant thunder, like the building pressure before a storm. "Elena, welcome, welcome." Evelyn's voice was warm honey poured over broken glass. "Tell us, how did you end up homeless?" Elena opened her mouth. The lights pressed down on her like hands. Around her, 5 million viewers watched a woman they did not know, about to be consumed by a spectacle they did not understand. "A fire destroyed our apartment," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "I had to choose between insurance and feeding my children." "And your ex-boyfriend," Evelyn continued, her tone shifting into something theatrical, something designed for maximum emotional impact. "Robert Hargrove. He is involved with law enforcement, yes?" That made it difficult to seek protection. Elena froze. Her eyes met Evelyn's across the brightness of the stage. "How do you know his name?" she whispered. Evelyn's smile never faltered. "We did our research. Tell America how he threatened you. How the police protected him instead of you. Help us understand the depth of your pain." Elena stood. The world was screaming at her to stay, to perform her trauma for donations that would never reach her, to let her story be devoured by people who wanted to feel charitable without actually changing anything. She walked off the stage. Not hurried. Not panicked. Simply walking, taking Oliver's hand, gathering her children, leaving the stage while 5 million people watched a woman choose her dignity over desperation. But what Elena did not know was that Matteo Castelliano was watching from his downtown office on the 42nd floor, and what Evelyn Blackwell had just done was a mistake so catastrophic that it would consume her entire world. The television remained on in Matteo's office. His face did not move. His hands remained folded on the dark oak desk in front of him. But in his eyes, something had shifted. Something cold and dangerous and absolutely certain. Vinny stood near the window, watching the same broadcast on his phone. When the screen went dark, he looked at Matteo and waited. "Get me everything," Matteo said, his voice like thunder rolling through a canyon. Robert Hargrove's police connections. His bank accounts. Every phone call in the last 6 months. Every threat he made to Elena on recordings, written, digital. Find every woman he stalked, every woman he threatened. Bring me the documentation. And the woman? Vinny asked. Evelyn Blackwell. Find out who sits on her foundation's board, Matteo continued, as if the question had not been asked. Who donates to her charity? Where the money flows? Who knew what she was planning? Get me everything. Theo emerged from the shadows of the office. How long? Matteo looked at the now dark television screen. 48 hours. I want this finished by the time Elena goes to work tomorrow morning. At 5:11 a.m., federal agents moved through Los Angeles like ghosts. 12 of them in dark suits, carrying warrants built on evidence that Matteo's lawyers had compiled through methods that probably would not survive close legal scrutiny but that were absolutely airtight for their intended purpose. They arrived at Robert Hargrove's apartment in a coordinated strike. The door came down at 5:48 and 12 seconds. Robert was in bed, his phone already beginning to ring as FBI agent Rodriguez read him his rights in a voice that carried no sympathy, no recognition of his former authority. Robert Hargrove, you are under arrest for stalking, aggravated assault, intimidation of a witness, making terroristic threats, and conspiracy with a police officer to obstruct justice, Rodriguez said, the words official and absolute. His hands were already moving, cuffing Robert's wrists behind his back with the smooth precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. This is a mistake, Robert said, but his voice had changed. The predator had become prey, and prey always knows the moment the reversal occurs. I am the victim here. She is lying. She is? You have the right to remain silent, Rodriguez interrupted. I strongly suggest you exercise that right. They walked him past news cameras that had been waiting outside his apartment, cameras that had been tipped off by sources that Robert's allies would spend weeks trying to identify, never understanding that Matteo had simply called certain journalists and offered them the story of their lives. The images of Robert in handcuffs, his perfect uniform rumpled, his authority shattered, went viral within 1 hour. 47 minutes later, Officer Martinez received his own visit from the Internal Affairs Division. By noon, he had been suspended pending investigation. The police connections that Robert believed were ironclad, permanent, absolute, were revealed as fragile as spider silk. Meanwhile, at 8:52 a.m., federal agents arrived at the offices of the Evelyn Blackwell Foundation with a different warrant. They entered with the kind of efficiency that suggested they had been planning this operation for months, which they had not. Matteo's lawyers had simply been extraordinarily thorough in the last 2 days. Evelyn Blackwell watched from her executive office as agents seized computers, files, documents, and 17 years of meticulous record-keeping designed to hide the fact that her foundation was primarily a vehicle for personal enrichment. Her assistant brought her coffee with shaking hands. Evelyn did not touch it. Ms. Blackwell, the lead agent, a woman named Patricia Simmons, stood in her doorway with her identification already displayed. You are under investigation for charity fraud, embezzlement of foundation funds, tax evasion, money laundering, and wire fraud. We have a warrant to seize your records. We also have testimony from 3 former employees detailing how donations were routinely redirected to your personal accounts. Evelyn's composure fractured like ice beneath sudden pressure. I have donors. I have lawyers. You cannot. We have been investigating your foundation for 11 months, Simmons interrupted, her tone absolute. Your decision yesterday to publicly use Elena Reynolds' story without consent, to solicit donations on the basis of her trauma, and then to route a significant portion of that campaign's proceeds to personal accounts, that was the final piece we needed to execute this warrant. By the end of the day, Evelyn's board members had resigned on camera. Her donors had pulled funding. The television networks that had once celebrated her charitable work were now running the footage of her arrest on a continuous loop, Evelyn in handcuffs, her perfect hair coming loose, the mask of her face cracking as reality arrived without warning. The news cycle that had been prepared to humiliate Elena Reynolds instead turned on Evelyn with the brutal swiftness of a predator that sensed weakness in the herd. Every major news outlet split the screen, Elena walking off stage with her dignity intact, Evelyn Blackwell being escorted from her office in restraints. #Justice for Elena trended for 3 consecutive days. Robert Hargrove faced federal charges carrying a 40-year minimum sentence. Officer Martinez was fired and referred for state criminal prosecution. Evelyn Blackwell's attorney announced that she would be taking a plea deal, 5 years in prison, full restitution, and permanent forfeiture of her foundation's assets. Darkness had not driven out darkness. Love had done that instead. One woman's choice to walk off a stage, to refuse spectacle, to protect her children even when desperation screamed at her to stay. That single act of integrity had been enough to break open everything that hidden rot had been carefully constructed to conceal. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. 1 year later, the city lights below the penthouse balcony painted Los Angeles in shades of amber and violet, and Elena Reynolds stood with her hands resting on the railing, barely recognizing the woman reflected in the glass. Gone was the delivery girl with ash on borrowed coats, the mother counting pennies in a studio apartment that smelled like desperation and instant ramen. She wore a simple black dress now, her hair pulled back, her medical billing degree framed in an office at Cedars-Sinai where she managed patient advocacy, where she helped families navigate the same financial abyss that had nearly swallowed her whole. The children were asleep inside, Oliver age 7, Maya age 5, Sophia age 3, in a penthouse with a view that still felt like a dream she might wake from at any moment. The apartment was hers. Matteo had transferred the money immediately after Robert went to federal prison, and when Elena refused it, when she told him she did not accept charity, Vinny had appeared in her hospital room with legal documents proving the funds were clean, legitimate, earned through her actions that night on the mountain, payment for a life saved. She had fought the acceptance for 3 months before her daughter asked why they could not stay in one place, and Elena had signed the papers. Matteo had been gone for 11 months. After the trial ended, after Evelyn's foundation collapsed under the weight of her own fraud, after Robert Hargrove received a 40-year federal sentence and his police connection scattered like roaches fleeing light, Matteo disappeared. She heard from Vinny once, his voice careful, "Boss says you deserve a life without his world touching it anymore." She had not heard from Matteo directly since. The door behind her opened. She knew his footsteps without turning, the measured tread of a man who had learned to move through the world like a weapon sheathed, controlled, deliberate. Matteo Castellano stepped onto the balcony still wearing the black suit, his hair grayer at the temples now, his eyes carrying a year of weight that pressed down like a stone on his shoulders. His voice came out rough, fractured like something that had been broken and imperfectly repaired. "You are hard to stay away from." Elena turned. The year had changed him in ways beyond the silver at his temples. There was something softer in his face now, something that looked almost like surrender. "Then why did you?" Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she gripped the railing. "Because you saved my life and I repaid you by dragging you into a war." He moved closer, the city noise, distant traffic, a helicopter passing miles away, the white noise of 8 million people living and dying in the darkness, filling the space between them. "Robert. Evelyn. That was my world bleeding into yours. You deserved better than the fallout from my enemies. You stopped 2 people who were destroying me." Elena's eyes met his. "That is not a war. That is protection. You do not understand what I have done." He stopped a few feet from her, his hands at his sides. "My brother betrayed me 3 years ago because I chose the family over his mercy. I have made decisions that would horrify you. I ordered men to do things. I am not a good man, Elena. You think I do not know that?" Her voice rose slightly. "I stitched a bullet wound in a mountain lodge while your men held guns and the blizzard tried to kill us both. I am not naive. I knew exactly who you were when I chose to save you anyway." Matteo stepped closer. "Then why did you return the wallet?" "Because the photograph inside, Sophia, I learned her name later, she looked at the camera like she was looking at someone she loved completely. And I thought, whoever lost this person is carrying something I understand. Grief. Love. The weight of protecting people you cannot always save." Elena's voice broke slightly. "I have been carrying that weight my entire life." When Matteo moved, it was like watching a statue learn to breathe. He reached for her hand, then stopped, his fingers hovering in the space between them. "I have carried something for a year. A truth I could not speak because you deserved freedom from my world. But I am selfish enough to come here anyway and tell you this: you changed me. Not because you saved my life with field medicine and kitchen tweezers on a lodge floor. Because you did it while your own world was falling apart, while your ex-boyfriend was hunting you, while you had $200 and 14 days, and you still chose mercy for a stranger. You are the bravest person I have ever met. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I was terrified every second. I thought he would find us. I thought I would lose the children. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. He took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. I cannot offer you a normal life. There will always be guards at the gates. There will always be threats from men who remember my name. There will always be pieces of my past rising up without warning. But I can offer you everything else. Protection for your children. A world where no one like Robert or Evelyn ever touches you again. And I can offer you this: I love you. I have loved you since you yelled at my lieutenants to boil water while performing surgery in a blizzard with tweezers and your own 2 hands. Elena stepped forward and took both his hands. I do not need normal. I need real. And this, you, feels like the first real thing that has happened since the fire burned down my apartment and my old life. You feel real. They kissed as the city lights multiplied below them, as the darkness deepened above, as something small and precious crystallized into permanence in the space between their bodies. Oliver's voice came from the doorway, drowsy and wonder-filled. Mama? Is that the prince from the castle? Elena laughed through her tears. Yes, baby. That is the prince. Matteo knelt to Oliver's eye level, his massive frame making the 7-year-old look even smaller. Your mama is the brave one. I am just the lucky one she saved. By morning, the news cycle had shifted again. Robert Hargrove's visitor log showed no one had come to see him in months. His former allies had abandoned him. Officer Martinez faced state criminal prosecution. Evelyn Blackwell's boardroom had dissolved, her donors fled, her mansion seized for restitution to actual homeless families. The woman who had tried to destroy Elena Reynolds on live television now faced cameras herself in an orange jumpsuit, her foundation's fraud exposed in meticulous detail across every news outlet. 6 months later, Elena stood in a medical office at Cedars-Sinai, helping a 43-year-old mother navigate a $47,000 surgery bill that had suddenly appeared in her inbox. The same conversation Elena had lived through when her daughter needed emergency treatment, the same mathematical terror of watching numbers destroy families. But now Elena could access grants. Elena could negotiate with billing departments. Elena could tell this woman, with absolute certainty, you will not lose your home. I will not let that happen. The $22,000 she once needed in 2 weeks to escape Robert became the amount she helped families secure monthly through patient advocacy programs. Matteo watched from his office as she worked, Vinny beside him reviewing security reports. She is good at this, Vinny observed, his tone carrying something like awe. She was always good at saving people, Matteo replied. Even people like me. Oliver's school play arrived in spring. Elena sat in the audience with Matteo beside her, his hand on hers in public now, in front of teachers and parents and the entire Los Angeles school community. Oliver played the baker in an adaptation of Cinderella, and when he forgot his lines, Matteo did not flinch or look away. He squeezed Elena's hand and smiled, and Elena understood something in that moment. The most powerful man she knew was willing to sit in a school auditorium for a child who was not his blood. That was love. That was choosing a family over an empire. May brought Sophia's 5th birthday. The penthouse balcony held 30 people, teachers, doctors, friends Elena had made in the light of her new life. Matteo stood with Oliver on his shoulders, watching Sophia blow out candles that Oliver had helped her count. 3 years ago, Sophia had barely spoken. Now she laughed like music. On the anniversary of the blizzard night, Elena and Matteo drove to the mountain lodge. The fireplace was lit. Their children slept on the couch where Elena had once stitched a bullet wound while Matteo bled and the world outside froze. Snow fell in thick, silent flakes against the windows. The darkness outside was complete, but inside there was warmth, light, the breathing of sleeping children, the sound of Elena's hand slipping into Matteo's. "Do you ever regret returning the wallet?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena smiled. "Every time you are late for dinner. Then I remember I saved your life and that gives me standing to be angry." She kissed him gently. "But no. I would drive through 1,000 blizzards." The city below Los Angeles glittered with 8 million stories. Somewhere tonight, someone was in crisis. Someone was counting dollars and finding nothing. Someone was terrified and alone. But somewhere else, someone else was choosing mercy. Someone else was driving through the darkness toward a stranger who needed saving. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. Drop a like. Share this with someone who needs to believe that one act of mercy can change everything. Subscribe. Comment below, what would you have done? We will see you in the next story.